A sitting cabinet secretary went on national television to accuse the Pentagon of sky poisoning. 30 states banned atmospheric spraying that scientists say is physically impossible. And Congress outlawed chemtrails as weapons, which means either the entire government forgot they're supposed to coordinate their lies, or you're breathing something so bad even they can't pretend it's fine anymore. October 2nd, 2001. Representative Dennis Kucinich introduces House Resolution 2977, the Space Preservation Act. But buried in the text is a specific list: psychotronic weapons, tectonic weapons, and chemtrails. Chemtrails are explicitly named alongside technologies to manipulate minds and trigger earthquakes. Presumably Kucinich was banning imaginary things, because that's how Congress operates, legislating against fairy tales and allocating taxpayer dollars to regulate unicorns. Or maybe he knew something, because when a congressman bans chemtrails alongside earthquake weapons, he's either completely lost his mind or he's seen classified briefings that would make your hair stand on end. And Kucinich kept his security clearance. Either the CIA is really bad at screening for mental health or really good at keeping secrets. Sleep tight. Fast forward to 2024. Tennessee passes a law banning the intentional injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals into the atmosphere. Not a resolution, a law, with penalties. Outlawing something that 76 atmospheric chemists say is physically impossible. That's like passing a law against dragon attacks. Actually, that would make more sense because at least Game of Thrones exists. You don't waste legislative resources outlawing fictional threats unless the dragons are real. And Tennessee wasn't alone. Over 30 states drafted similar legislation, citing nanochaff and smart dust. 30 states. That's not a fringe movement. That's a quorum of paranoia, or a quorum of people who read something classified and couldn't sleep afterward. November 8th, 2005. UK Minister Elliot Morley tells Parliament, "The department is not researching chemtrails as they are not scientifically recognized phenomena." Translation: "We don't look for it because we haven't found it, and we haven't found it because we don't look for it." Circular logic so perfect it could win a geometry award. The Ouroboros would be impressed. Somewhere, a philosophy professor is having an existential crisis and doesn't know why. July 2025. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. circulates a federal memo establishing a task force to investigate atmospheric spraying. The memo alleges aerosolized aluminum, barium, strontium being sprayed under the auspices of combating global warming. Kennedy goes on national television and links operations to defense. Quote, "It's done, we think, by DARPA. Those materials are put in jet fuel. So a cabinet secretary is investigating whether defense is spraying heavy metals. If he finds evidence, does he arrest himself? Does DARPA arrest him? Is there an arrestor? How deep does the arrest chain go? It's a government-wide game of Among Us, except the imposter might be everyone. And nobody brought snacks." In 2016, researchers surveyed 77 atmospheric chemists. 76 denied any large-scale spraying program. 98.7% consensus. Case closed, right? Except one formally dissented, citing unexplainable barium in a remote region with no barium in the soil. Just barium. Hanging out. Vibing at altitude. No explanation, no apology. So 76 chemists say it's impossible, and one has unexplainable readings. Guess which one still gets invited to conferences? Hint, it's not the guy who brought a spectrometer to a consensus party. Scientific consensus is wonderful until someone shows up with actual data and ruins the vibe. Then consensus isn't a method anymore, it's a headcount. Before you dismiss this, why would governments ban something that doesn't exist? Legislatures don't ban unicorns, so they don't hold committee hearings about Bigfoot zoning regulations. So when 30 states and a cabinet secretary take action, either they're delusional or they know something you don't. And based on what citizens found in rainwater, the answer is worse than both options. Here's what they claim is normal. Standard aviation operates above 26,000 feet. When water vapor hits cold air, it condenses into ice crystals. That's a contrail. In low humidity, those contrails evaporate within 2 minutes. Keep that number in mind. 2 minutes. Remember that number. The government certainly hopes you won't. If you want more investigations where physics exposes official lies, hit subscribe. Because what happens next is where the science stops making sense and the excuses start getting creative. But some contrails don't follow the rules. Starting in the late 90s, citizens documented trails persisting for hours, spreading up to 400 meters in height, several kilometers wide. They expand. They merge. They form artificial cirrus sheets covering entire sky sections. Meteorologists call these persistent contrails, claiming they occur in ice-supersaturated regions where humidity exceeds 70%. Invisible pockets of high humidity. You can't see them, can't measure them from the ground. But they're definitely there. Trust the invisible humidity pockets. Trust the atmospheric Swiss cheese that conveniently explains everything and can be verified by no one. Just don't ask follow-up questions. Here's where that breaks. 2 aircraft at identical altitudes, Same flight path, same conditions. One leaves a trail that vanishes in 90 seconds. The other persists for 6 hours. Both hit the same air. But apparently they hit different invisible humidity pockets. So two planes flying the same route just hit different humidity lottery tickets. One gets a scratch-off winner, the other gets bankruptcy. That's not meteorology, that's a slot machine. And nobody's auditing the casino. Late 90s, rural Washington, rancher William Wallace. Not the Braveheart guy, this one has cows instead of a claymore. Observes a gray aircraft leaving persistent trails. Within days, respiratory problems, crop anomalies. He's not alone. Farmers across the region report the same symptoms. Apparently the cows aren't feeling great either, but nobody's polling them. So they did what any rational person would do when the government isn't investigating. They started investigating themselves. Because apparently, even atmospheric chemistry is do-it-yourself now. Citizens collected rainwater beneath persistent trail grids and sent samples to independent labs. Elevated aluminum, barium, strontium. In 2007, a Louisiana report measured atmospheric barium at 6.8 parts per million. Normal is parts per billion. That's 1,000 times higher than it should be. 1,000? Not a rounding error, not a bad Tuesday. 1,000 times. September 2000. EPA, FAA, NASA, and NOAA publish a joint fact sheet. Persistent contrails are solely ice crystals with no health risk. 4 agencies, 1 press release, 0 alarm. When was the last time 4 agencies teamed up to reassure you about water vapor? What's the group chat called? Definitely not hiding anything? You don't deploy 4 agencies for a non-issue. You deploy them when the answers are in the rainwater. But citizens had chemical analysis. Aluminum, barium, strontium. Real numbers, real labs, real chain of custody, which, in hindsight, was extremely rude of them. So the government needed an explanation. And the explanation was so insultingly stupid, it makes you wonder if they were testing how much nonsense the public would swallow. Geochemists. Aluminum constitutes 8% of Earth's crust, so detections are natural crustal dust. Elevated readings? Citizens used mason jars with metal lids, contaminating samples. By that logic, you should be thrilled when your blood test shows elevated iron, because iron constitutes 5% of Earth's crust. Doctor, your iron is dangerously high. You. No. Out, I've just been inhaling crustal dust. Perfectly natural, balanced, as all things should be. Please don't try that at your next physical. Your doctor will not be amused. The aluminum readings are invalid because people use jars with metal lids. So atmospheric aluminum is so sensitive that microscopic jar lid exposure ruins the sample. But dispersing millions of tons into the air is perfectly safe. It's like saying peanuts are harmful if you touch the jar, but perfectly safe if you aerosolize them and spray them in someone's face. Schrödinger's heavy metal. It exists in 2 states until observed, then collapses into whichever is most convenient for the agency issuing the press release. Physics hasn't been this flexible since the last budget hearing. But in 2005, yes, a Spanish lab mixed coal fly ash, toxic industrial waste, with distilled water. What dissolved matched citizen-collected rainwater almost perfectly. Aluminum to barium ratio, strontium to barium ratio, identical, like finding the murder weapon with the serial number filed off, but the receipt still in the box. Coal fly ash has a chemical fingerprint, and that fingerprint was in rainwater underneath persistent contrail grids. Awkward. Global coal fly ash production. 130 million metric tons annually. 900 Eiffel Towers. Every year. Just sitting there. Looking for a job? Extremely available? Suspiciously cheap. Already mass-produced as waste nobody wants. It's the industrial waste equivalent of a perfect crime. Except the fingerprints are literally falling from the sky. Photographs leaked. Boeing 747 interiors fitted with large black barrels. Not seats. Barrels. Yellow biohazard stickers. Aviation forms exploded. Boeing engineers. Water ballast for center of gravity testing. Labels digitally altered. Right. Because if I were going to Photoshop something onto an airplane interior, I'd definitely choose biohazard labels. Not flames. Not racing stripes. Not a hilarious bumper sticker. Biohazard warnings. The natural choice for fake internet clout. Move over cat videos. But that doesn't explain Harrison Township. Valentine's Day 2016. Love is in the air. Also, synthetic cryoconite. Residents wake to oily, ashy substance covering properties. Lab results, synthetic cryoconite. Not natural, synthetic. Coal fly ash engineered to absorb sunlight and melt ice. A substance designed to melt glaciers coating suburban Michigan. Either catastrophic navigational error, sorry, we thought this was Greenland, GPS was upside down, or it was exactly where it was supposed to be. Pick your nightmare. The government never issued a statement, no press release, no apology. Absolute crickets. Silence has never been this loud. Persistent trails defying physics, rainwater with coal, fly ash ratios, aircraft with biohazard barrels, substance engineered to melt ice falling on suburban Michigan on Valentine's Day. At this point, I've lost count of the coincidences. I wasn't great at math to begin with, but this broke whatever was left. You've seen them. White lines that don't disappear. Persistent aviation-induced cirrus clouds now cover 2.5 million square kilometers, larger than Greenland. Sideweave cloud covered an entire Algeria and nobody noticed. Nobody even sent a memo. These artificial clouds measurably alter the thermal radiation budget. They trap heat, they warm the planet, and nobody asked your permission, not even a courtesy email. Standard contrails evaporate in 2 minutes. Some persist for 6 hours. That's 180 times longer. If your 2-minute microwave burrito took 6 hours, you'd call the manufacturer. You'd want answers. You'd file a complaint. But apparently atmospheric physics gets a pass. No complaints department, no manager to speak to, just invisible humidity pockets and a reassuring press release. The government tried 3 explanations. Crustal dust, jar lids, coincidence, all different, all wrong, all insulting. When your first 3 alibis collapse, most people stop talking. Plan D was to pretend the conversation never happened. Unfortunately, chemists have notebooks, and citizens have mason jars, which are apparently too contaminated to produce valid results and too irrelevant to worry about. Pick one. But the chemistry is one thing. What it's doing to human bodies is worse, and this part doesn't require you to believe in chemtrails. This part just requires you to have lungs and live near an airport. Low bar. Most of you qualify. Next time you're picking someone up at arrivals, waiting in that cell phone lot, breathing that air, consider this. Jet turbine emissions. Nearly 10 million particles per cubic centimeter during takeoff. Ultrafine particulates smaller than 0.1 micrometers. They bypass every respiratory defense, cross into the bloodstream, and carry jet exhaust chemicals straight into your organs. Every pickup, every drop-off, every time you watch planes from the parking garage because you showed up 2 hours early like your dad told you to. Airport ground personnel studies reveal elevated biomarkers of genotoxic exposure. Their DNA is showing strand breaks and increased sister chromatid exchange, chromosomes swapping genetic material during cell division. A little is normal. Elevated levels are associated with significantly increased cancer risk. Airport workers show elevated levels, but the EPA remains unconcerned, presumably because chromosome rearranging is just part of the job description now. Right between lift heavy luggage and develop occupational cancer. Great benefits package. Chemical analysis identifies neurotoxic organophosphate esters like tricresyl phosphate in airport air. Compounds that attack the nervous system. Present at every major airport, every single one. The FAA assures us levels are within acceptable limits. Acceptable to whom? To their lawyers? To anyone who doesn't work on a tarmac? They didn't specify. But definitely acceptable to someone sitting in an office very far from a runway. But it gets worse. Fire retardant. FOSCheck, LC95W, 2024. Testing revealed contamination so severe the numbers don't look real. EPA maximum for cadmium, 5 micrograms per liter. Detected levels? 2,880 times that limit. Let me say that again. 2,880 times. The limit filed a missing persons report. The limit needs therapy. See, if this was in your tap water, hazmat would be at your door before lunch. But when it's falling onto firefighters from an airplane, apparently it's fine. Tap water gets EPA oversight. Sky water gets a shrug and a try not to breathe. This substance aerosolizes over wildfires and gets inhaled by every firefighter on the line. Nobody told them. For 15 years, nobody told them. Apparently, thank you for your service doesn't include a toxicology report. Orange County Fire Authority Supervisor Joel Lane went public. Firefighters were never informed via safety data sheets that toxic heavy metals were present. Safety data sheets have one job. Tell workers what's dangerous. Literally one job. It's in the name. Safety. Data sheet. Not the suggestion data sheet, not the optional information pamphlet. Not the thoughts and prayers bulletin. When a 15-year operation forgets catastrophic heavy metal contamination, that's not negligence. That's criminal negligence wearing a government lanyard and collecting a pension. If what you're hearing makes you angry, leave a comment. Tell me if you live near an airport, because the data says you should be noticing health effects whether you believe in chemtrails or not. This part isn't theory, this part is toxicology, and toxicology doesn't care about your opinion. Between 2009 and 2021, 419 tons of toxic heavy metals dispersed via aerial fire suppression onto populated areas for 12 years, and nobody thought to check what was in it. Or they checked and didn't tell anyone. Pick whichever explanation lets you sleep tonight. Our spoiler, neither one will. Withholding toxicity data isn't oversight. It's policy. And policy requires intent. Somebody made a decision, somebody signed off, and somebody decided firefighters breathing cadmium was an acceptable trade-off for not answering uncomfortable questions. That person has a desk and presumably a conscience they stopped consulting years ago. Populations within 20 kilometers of major airports experience statistically higher rates of hypertension, diabetes, dementia, respiratory illness. The single strongest variable predicting disease isn't diet, isn't exercise, isn't genetics. It's proximity to airports. That's not correlation. That's a zip code death sentence. And real estate agents don't mention it in the listing. The science says DNA is showing damage. And cadmium is 2,880 times the safe limit. Populations near airports are getting sick at elevated rates, and the research that might explain why keeps getting retracted, denied, or defunded. But the official position is that everything's fine. The house is on fire, the smoke detector is screaming, and the fire department issued a press release saying the temperature is within acceptable parameters. Meanwhile, they're blocking the exits. Now, here's where the government stops denying and starts actively burying. That's a different crime. Because you don't suppress research into something that isn't happening. You suppress research into something you desperately need to keep happening. August 1996. The Air Force published weather as a force multiplier. Owning the weather in 2025. I'm not understanding weather, not politely. Asking weather for permission. Owning, like a deed, like property rights to the cumulus clouds above your house. Explicit goals for atmospheric manipulation as military advantage. Target date, 2025. We're past that. Either the Air Force failed, a first for a branch that considers failure a budget increase opportunity, or they succeeded and didn't tell you. And the military is famously transparent about classified achievements, right? 2015. Current Science publishes a paper identifying coal fly ash as the primary geoengineering aerosol component. Passes peer review. Gets published. Champagne? Tenure? A polite email from the Nobel Committee? No. Within weeks, organized retraction demands arrive. Not corrections, not, hey, Sci, we found a math error in Table 3. Full retraction, full erasure. Memory hole the whole thing, like it never existed. That's not scientific discourse. That's a peer-reviewed assassination. 2 subsequent papers retracted without the author seeing complaints. Retracted without rebuttal. That's a trial without a defense attorney, found guilty by a jury you're not allowed to see for a crime they won't name. And the WHO rejected, without peer review, a formal prospectus warning of global health crisis, rejected at the door. That's not science. That's a bouncer checking the guest list. Sorry, your findings aren't on the list. No inconvenient truths after 10 p.m. Please take your spectrometer and leave. The EPA claims the government does not conduct atmospheric manipulation. And accept the 1978 UN NMOD Treaty binds signatory nations, including the U.S., into peaceful environmental modification. We're not doing it. We just signed a treaty agreeing to do it peacefully. We're not doing the thing, but if we were, we'd be doing it peacefully. But we're not. But the treaty exists, but it's not happening. Clear? Neither is the EPA. That's quantum bureaucracy. The program exists in superposition until a FOIA request collapses the waveform, and the response comes back redacted, heavily. Like someone took a Sharpie to the Constitution and called it compliance. If modification isn't happening, why the treaty? If it is happening peacefully, why is the EPA denying it? Not rhetorical questions. They're the kind of questions that get your FOIA request lost in the mail. Twice. Forest Service and CAL FIRE declined sample requests for independent analysis. Rationale. Proprietary trade secrets for fire retardant. Let that sink in, like there's a competitive market for sky chemicals and we can't let the competitors know our secret recipe. Oh no, if competitor B finds out we use cadmium at 2,880 times the EPA limit, they'll steal our formula. If researchers found out what's in it, they might tell the firefighters breathing it. Can't have that. The free market depends on keeping firefighters in the dark about what's destroying their kidneys. Adam Smith would understand. Invisible hand, invisible toxins. Perfect synergy. 2024. A canceled University of Washington cloud brightening experiment turned out to be the precursor to a 3,900 square mile aerosol spraying operation off the North American coast. Canceled. Except it was relocated offshore, where wind would definitely not blow it back toward populated areas. Because wind famously respects boundaries. That's not cancellation, that's rebranding. We've decided not to spray your neighborhood. We're going to spray the ocean. Please stop filing FOIA requests. Our shredder is overheating. Climate scientists Dr. Daniel Swain and Dr. David Keith received coordinated harassment and required police protection. Scientists needed bodyguards. For doing science in America in 2024. They weren't threatened for discovering a secret program. They were threatened for proposing to do it intentionally. The public already suspected it was happening. Funny how that works. Propose doing the thing everyone thinks you're already doing, and suddenly you need a security detail. The scientists weren't whistleblowers, they were architects, and the public recognized the floor plan because they've been living in the building. Drop your theory in the comments. We have agencies refusing samples, journals retracting papers, a military document about owning the weather, and scientists who need police escorts to do their jobs. That's not science. That's suppression wearing a lab coat and filing the paperwork on time. We only know about the cloud brightening relocation because documents leaked. What else is happening that hasn't leaked yet? What's behind those redaction bars? Presumably not a recipe for banana bread. If contrails are water vapor, why do persistent clouds cover 2.5 million square kilometers, altering thermal radiation, attributed to normal aviation? Except atmospheric physics didn't produce persistent cover at this scale 30 years ago. Contrails used to evaporate. Now they linger, spread, merge into cloud sheets lasting hours. Either atmospheric conditions fundamentally changed in one generation with no explanation, or something else is in the fuel. Neither option is comforting. Neither option comes with a hug. But only one explains the coal fly ash. So, two theories. Both have serious flaws. Both are terrifying. And the fun part is, you don't get to pick neither. Welcome to the worst multiple choice test of your life. So, Theory 1. You're trapped in an experiment you never consented to. Stratospheric aerosol injection. Aircraft dispersing thousands of tons of reflective nanoparticles to cool Earth. The evidence is substantial. The Air Force document, Kucinish's legislation, 30 states banning spraying, Kennedy's investigation, coal fly ash ratios in rainwater, synthetic cryoconite falling on suburban Michigan, biohazard barrels in Boeing interiors. Critical flaw. If they're artificially cooling the planet and suddenly stop, all mass warming hits at once. Termination shock, crop failures, ecosystem collapse. If it's happening, it can never stop. It's the Hotel California of atmospheric intervention. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. Except you can't check out either because the front desk burned down, you were never checked in, and the hotel might not exist. But if it does exist, you're trapped forever in the minibar, and the minibar is full of barium. Theory 2. What if there's no secret program? What if this is just what global aviation looks like when nobody's watching the exhaust? What if we've been slowly poisoning ourselves for 50 years and nobody noticed because we were all too busy arguing about airplane peanuts, legroom, and whether the armrest belongs to the window or the middle seat? Medical data shows populations within 20 kilometers of airports have elevated disease. Airport workers show DNA damage. Jet exhaust contains neurotoxic organophosphates. Fire retardant contains catastrophic heavy metals. Just industrial-scale negligence so large it looks intentional. On a critical flaw? Doesn't explain the chemical composition matches? Doesn't explain coal fly ash ratios in rainwater? Doesn't explain synthetic cryoconite in Harrison Township? Doesn't explain why 30 states tried banning something that's supposedly not happening? And it definitely doesn't explain why journals retract papers and agencies refuse to hand over samples. Because you don't suppress research into an accident. You don't retract findings about negligence. Negligence doesn't need a cover-up. A program does. Both theories trap us. But here's what doesn't require theory. What doesn't require belief. What doesn't require you to pick a side or wear a tinfoil hat or argue with strangers on the internet. Metals are in the soil. DNA is showing damage. Firefighters were poisoned for 12 years without being told. Research is suppressed. Samples are denied. And you're breathing it. Whether it's a Pentagon program or Boeing exhaust, your lungs don't fact-check. Cadmium doesn't ask about intent, and neither does cancer. 17% of the global population believes a secret atmospheric spraying program exists. 1 in 6. Over 1 billion people. That's more than the population of North America. That's a lot of tinfoil hats. Or a lot of pattern recognition. Depends on which side of the redaction bar you're standing on. So either we're experiencing the largest mass delusion in history, or the remaining 83% haven't looked up yet. If this disturbs your reality, share it with someone who still thinks those white lines are just water vapor. They might not thank you, but their lungs will. Make someone uncomfortable. Make them look up. Because the sky changed, nobody asked your permission, and nobody's planning to stop. And that's the only thing that's certain.